Hello everyone, and welcome to this Cambridge Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring webinar on how to develop your students' reading skills using baseline assessment. Just a few housekeeping notes before I hand over to Suzanne. Please note that your microphones are muted. We cannot hear any members of the audience, and this is to ensure good sound quality. But if you'd like to ask questions, please post them in the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be happy to answer those at the end of the webinar. You'll receive a certificate of attendance, which will be sent to your email inbox 1 hour after the webinar finishes, and you'll receive a copy of the webinar recording and the slides sent to you via email next week. Just a little bit about Cambridge Chem, which is the Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring. We've been working with schools for 40 years in over 100 countries. We're known for our evidence-based research approach to baseline informative assessments, using extensive data sets to support future outcomes and development. We work with schools, ministries, and associations to transform the outcomes of the students they teach. In 2019, we became part of the University of Cambridge, which has supported our reach and abilities to support young people across the world. We help teachers turn data into knowledge, we bridge the gap between research and practice, and we provide evidence to support good decision-making. With that, I'll now hand over to Suzanne Tipping, who is one of our assessment advisors. Over to you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Megan, and welcome everybody. I'm delighted to have you here as we explore a powerful tool that can help elevate your students' reading abilities and drive meaningful improvements in their learning journey. But firstly, a quick introduction to myself. My name is Suzanne Tipping. I've been an assessment advisor at CHEM since January this year, after working in secondary education for 20 years, primarily as a business and economics teacher, but also in various roles with academic and pastoral responsibilities. And I've also been a GCSE examiner. Before we dive into the details today, let's take a moment to consider a recent report that sheds light on the current state of reading proficiency among students in the UK. The Department for Education recently released a blog revealing that 73% of pupils at Key Stage 2 achieved the expected standard in reading for the 2023 SATs. And while this statistic indicates progress, it also emphasises the ongoing need for targeted approaches to further enhance our students' reading skills. So for those of you who are looking for effective strategies to enhance reading proficiency among Key Stage 2 students and beyond, our webinar today will focus on the invaluable role of baseline assessments in achieving this goal. And I'm excited to guide you through our suite of baseline assessments and explain how they can transform your students' reading abilities. So our primary objective today is to equip you with the insights into leveraging baseline assessment as a tool to understand individual reading abilities, tailor interventions, and set achievement targets. We'll explore how baseline assessments offer a detailed snapshot of each student's reading skills, enabling you to identify strengths, areas for growth, and potential challenges. We'll discover how baseline assessments empower you as educators to craft targeted interventions tailored to each student's specific needs, fostering personalised learning experiences for them. And we'll learn how to set achievable yet ambitious reading improvement targets based on accurate baseline data, motivating students and guiding their progress effectively. I'll talk about primary and secondary baseline assessments, and advice that I give for students will be for students across the key stages. So hopefully there is relevant content for everyone today. So during the webinar, we're going to take a look at 5 pivotal steps in utilising baseline assessments to develop your students' reading skills. So firstly, we'll look at the significance of baseline assessments in the context of reading skill development. We'll then look at steps to effectively administer and analyse baseline assessments and the data that they provide. Then we'll look at how you can start your planning and craft tailored interventions based on the baseline assessment insights that are provided. We'll look at how setting realistic and motivating reading improvement targets can help. And we'll also take a look at a real-world success story showcasing the impact of baseline assessments. So before embarking on any journey, it's essential to understand the starting point. Baseline assessments provide a clear snapshot of each student's reading abilities, and that helps you identify strengths, areas for growth, and potential challenges. By gaining insights into where your students currently stand, you'll be better equipped to guide them towards improvement. And the Cambridge Chem baseline assessments are designed to comprehensively assess various aspects of students' reading abilities. They're developed by experts in educational research and assessment and employ a rigorous approach to provide a really valuable insight into students' reading skills. They're closely linked to the DFE's reading framework. So just to quote a little bit from the reading framework, the National Curriculum Programmes of Study for Reading reflect the model presented as two dimensions, word reading and comprehension. Language comprehension does not refer to reading itself, but rather to the way in which we make sense of words, sentences, and the wider language we hear or read. Language develops through interaction with others. Inevitably, by the time they start school, some children understand more and know more words than others because of the quantity and quality of the interactions they've already had with adults and others. Children who begin school with poor understanding of language will need considerable support to develop their spoken language, if necessary, throughout their school years. Decoding refers to reading unfamiliar words, words that have not been read before, by saying the sounds corresponding to the letters in the words and then blending the sounds together, either aloud or silently, reading familiar words accurately and silently at a glance. That is, no longer saying the words consciously. So I'm going to provide an overview of how the Cambridge Chem baseline assessments assess reading ability and in relation to that framework in particular. So reading comprehension. Reading comprehension skills are evaluated by presenting students with a passage of text. Students are required to read and understand these texts, and when given a choice of words, must select the word that fits into the sentence most appropriately. This component provides insights into students' proficiency in understanding written content. In terms of vocabulary and word recognition, well, assessing vocabulary and word recognition is crucial in determining students' ability to comprehend texts. And our assessments include tasks that measure students' knowledge of words, their meanings, and how words are used in context. So this component helps identify students' vocabulary growth and their ability to decode unfamiliar words while reading. For word recognition, the pupil hears or reads a high or medium frequency word which includes a sentence to put it into context, and they must then select the target word from a choice of words on the screen. For word decoding, the pupil hears or reads a nonsense or unfamiliar word, and they must then select the target word from a choice of words on screen. So for example, in Cambridge Primary Insight for 5 to 11-year-olds, they will hear the words. They can hear the words as they watch the screen. They might wear, if they wear headphones, then they can do it at the same time as other students as well in the room. Whereas with Mid-Years and Yellis and Alice, our secondary and post-16 assessment, they will read the words. They won't be read to them. And in addition to assessing vocab, the Mid-Years and Yellis assessments also assess speed and accuracy and proofreading. So fluency in reading is another important aspect. The assessment includes tasks that measure students' reading speed and accuracy. Fluency is assessed through timed readings where students read sequences of letters that they have to match on the screen. And in the proofreading section, students are asked to read passages of text and identify errors in spelling, punctuation and grammar. So the Cambridge Chem baseline assessments in both the primary assessments and the secondary assessments in post-16 use a combination of carefully designed reading tasks to provide a comprehensive overview of students' reading abilities. And the results from this assessment help you to identify individual students' strengths and areas for growth, to tailor interventions, set improvement targets, and track progress over time. And by focusing on a holistic approach to reading assessment, the Chem baseline assessments aim to support you in promoting effective reading skill development among your students. So the Chem assessments generate a range of data in their reports. So we provide an individual student report, for example, and this report provides a detailed overview of the student's performance across different cognitive areas. Cambridge Primary Insight includes a specific module that assesses reading ability. The report includes both numerical scores and qualitative descriptions to help teachers and school leaders interpret the results. In addition to the individual reports, schools receive group-level reports that aggregate the data for the entire cohort or specific subgroups. And these reports can help schools identify overall strengths and areas for improvement in their student population. So this allows you to identify any trends in terms of students' reading ability. And this report could be the rationale for a need for a whole school approach to develop literacy and reading skills, for example. And this was certainly the case in the secondary school I most recently worked in. And the strategy included actions that involved all students across the year groups. And I'll talk a little bit about that strategy later on. The reports offer insights into student academic abilities and potential, and you can use this information to tailor your teaching strategies and your curriculum planning to better meet the needs of individual students and the group. Cambridge Primary Insight and mid-year assessments are often administered periodically, such as annually. So you can compare results from different assessment sessions, and schools can track students' progress over time and measure the impact of their interventions, including reading interventions. The reports can facilitate productive discussions between teachers, students, and parents during parents' evenings or meetings. And they provide a clear picture of students' strengths and areas of development. And this fosters a collaborative approach to supporting the student's learning journey. The CPI, so that's Cambridge Primary Insight, and Midges and Yellis parent and guardian reports are ideal for this. So this visualisation here illustrates how our reports help you support your students on a school, year group, class and individual student level. And it might be useful to take a closer look at this along with some of the testimonials that we have on this slide as well. In your own time when you receive the recording, you could pause it and take it all in because there's quite a lot on this slide. But you know, having standardised baseline assessment and a set of reports across a number of schools in a trust will provide better connected data and equal opportunity for support and challenge in all of the schools when it comes to reading. Not only reading though, but also in developing spelling, maths and non-verbal abilities. So certainly if you're part of a multi-academy trust or a school group, do please get in touch to find out more about what we offer for school trusts and how our baseline supports can how our baseline assessments can support students in all of your schools and provide that better connected data for you. So let's consider the types of interventions that you might use to develop reading skills. Now, with a clear understanding of your students' reading abilities after completing the baseline assessments, it's time to design interventions that meet their unique needs, considering various learning styles, strengths, and challenges that they might have. Improving reading skills and ability is a multifaceted process that involves various strategies and approaches. And here are some of the effective strategies to enhance reading skills. I have no doubt that you'll be using some or possibly all of these in your school already. So I would love you to comment in the chat box which of these you find most effective. Or if you have good practice to share, I'd love to hear what your most successful reading intervention strategies have been in your school. And Megan can share those with us at the end of this section of the webinar. So I'll just go through these in a little bit of detail. Regular reading practice. It sounds quite obvious, but it's important to cover the basics as well. Encourage students to read consistently, both in and out of the classroom, and provide access to a diverse range of reading materials, including books, newspapers, magazines, and online resources. And engage students in independent reading activities that match both their interests and their reading levels. I'll use the example of my children's primary school. Actually, they encourage children to read at least 3 times per week at home. And if parents and carers record this in their reading record, they'll be entered into a raffle to win a reading book that they can choose from a selection on show in the main hall. And it's also okay and encouraged as well to record reading from books at home that they like and enjoy, even if they're not part of the school reading scheme, because this often encourages children to read even more. For vocabulary development, introduce new words regularly and explicitly teach their meanings within the context of reading. So encourage students to use context clues, dictionaries, and other resources to understand those unfamiliar words, and engage in discussions to reinforce vocabulary comprehension to make sure they understand what they're reading. Just recently at one of our secondary network meetings, we shared ideas about how to improve students' vocabulary, and a whole host of teaching and learning activities were suggested, including using topic-specific bookmarks for vocabulary in exercise books. That's one that was particularly popular in secondary school to be used for the different subject exercise books. Vocab marketplace tasks where students had the opportunity to trade their knowledge of words with each other and help each other understand subject-specific words. Using word webs and discussing the etymology of words, having a word of the week, and using regular fast vibe vocabulary starters to make sure that key terms stick. Use comprehension strategies. So teach students comprehension strategies such as predicting, summarising, making inferences, and visualising while reading. These strategies help students extract meanings from texts and enhance their overall understanding. I know in the past I've covered English lessons where students have had to do this as part of their exam technique for their English exam. But at the same time, I could see how these skills were transferable to my business and economics lessons and assessments that they did, where students would have to read case studies and extract from articles and again make inferences, predictions, and draw conclusions based on what they'd actually read in the text in the case studies in their exam paper. Close reading, so guide students through close reading sessions where they analyse texts in depth, really focusing on details, the author's intent and thematic elements. And this encourages critical thinking and a deeper understanding of the material. And again, if I consider my own experience, I know this can be beneficial when students need to identify the hooks in exam case studies. There's always clues in the case studies to help them answer their questions and apply the theory that they've learned to a particular business, for example. And they can recognise the impact of some of the finer details that are written about and how they might affect the decision that a business owner or a manager would make, for example. Active reading. So teach students to engage actively with the text by highlighting, underlining, taking notes, and asking questions as they read. Really encourage them to interact with the content, which enhances retention and comprehension. And this is a key piece of exam technique that I would always encourage both in class and during both low and high stakes assessments with my students. Reading aloud, incorporate read aloud sessions where teachers model effective reading strategies and expressive reading. This helps students improve their listening comprehension and fluency while still experiencing proper intonation and pacing. And this is one of the strategies that I referred to earlier that we used in my previous school. So all students would participate in reading sessions during tutor time. We moved from just private reading individual books once a week to more frequent opportunities, with the teacher reading aloud and students following along in their own copy of the same book. Teachers were also encouraged to model reading in class with their own subject-specific texts as well. You can organise literature circles or book clubs where students read and discuss books in small groups, and this encourages peer interaction, critical thinking, and deeper analysis of the texts. And it can provide a reason to read and bring in a social aspect too. I've been a member of a book club before, and I know the pressure of knowing book club was coming up and having to talk about the text that I'd read. You know, it was a motivation to pick up that book and make sure that I read it, even if I thought I didn't have time or didn't feel like it. You can use graphic organisers such as concept maps, story maps, and Venn diagrams to help students visually organise information from the texts. These tools enhance comprehension and facilitate the identification of story elements too. And have students write summaries, reflections, and responses to what they've read. Writing about their reading experiences helps reinforce comprehension and encourages really thoughtful analysis of what they've read as well. There are a whole host of digital tools and apps available now. So, you know, utilize educational apps and digital tools that offer interactive reading experiences. So these tools can engage students with multimedia elements, interactive quizzes, and also, you know, adaptive content so that it adapts to their ability level as well. I know my primary age children love Teach Your Monster to Read app. They like that one. Scaffolded instruction, so provide gradual support and guidance as students progress in their reading abilities. You can begin with simpler texts and gradually increase the complexity as their skills improve. And of course, different students or pupils might be working on reading they will be reading texts and reading books of different levels within your classroom. But I know, if I was providing something to read in the classroom, whether it be an article or, you know, an extract from a textbook or something like that, often I would, you know, I might simplify a version, or I might give some students who needed that greater level of challenge a more complex article from a more highbrow broadsheet newspaper or something for them to read. You can conduct individual conferences with students to discuss their reading progress, what they feel their challenges are, or what you feel their challenges are as well, and what their goals should be. Now, the word conference sounds a little bit formal. It can be just a conversation or a one-to-one chat at your desk or their desk or in the reading corner, for example. But tailor your instruction based on their specific needs and their interests that are highlighted during these conversations. Differentiated instruction is a strategy that we're all familiar with. So we all recognise that students have diverse learning styles and abilities. So differentiate instruction by providing various reading materials, as I mentioned, and activities that cater to the individual strengths and needs of those pupils in your class. So by combining these strategies and customising them to individual students, you can create a really comprehensive and effective approach to improving reading skills. And, you know, this will help to foster a real lifelong love for reading. So at this stage, I'd like to ask Megan, do we have any intervention strategies discussed in the chat box?
Yeah, well, we've got one that's come through, which is sort of a statement around what isn't on the list, is that a child with poor decoding needs explicit and systematic phonics instruction. So in England specifically, it's called systematic synthetic phonics. Also reading using decodable books. I don't know if that sort of is something that people had considered as well.
Yes, absolutely. And if anybody didn't, you know, mention any specific examples, I have actually got some examples coming up as well, as where the teaching of phonics is really important as part of this learning journey for improving reading skills. So were there any more, Megan, or shall I move on?
That was all of them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. So just a couple more ideas of ways to help children understand text structures. So, through early experiences, well, first of all, knowledge of text structures is one of the factors that contributes specifically to text comprehension. So through early experiences, children naturally develop a sense of how stories are typically structured. They'll be able to tell from the structure of the first paragraph or two that a passage is likely to be a story, and they can then predict how the structure will unfold. And much of this knowledge will be acquired by listening to others read stories to them before they begin to learn to read for themselves. And we know that, when children enter reception level in particular, they will all enter with different experiences, and some will have had a vast experience of being read to, they'll have their regular bedtime story, for example, whereas that won't be the case for all children. So children with reading difficulties as well, develop this knowledge of the structure of a narrative text at a much lower rate. So there's ways to help children understand text structures, for example. So you can mix up the paragraphs of a story and ask the children to organise them into the correct order. You could select a short story of appropriate level and insert sentences that are unexpected or out of context, and instruct the child to find the sentences that don't make sense within the story, then review the sentences and discuss why they weren't part of the story. And you can provide the child with a tells organizer. So ask them to study the title, examine and skim the story for clues about its content, look for important words, look for words that you don't understand, and think about the story setting and decide whether you think it's fact or fiction. And when the children get used to using an organizer like tells, the benefits extend to listening comprehension as well as reading comprehension. You can ask the child to restate in their own words or writing what happens in each paragraph of a story as they're reading it. Fluent readers will monitor their own understanding. They can judge how well they comprehend a passage and alter their strategies accordingly. Self-monitoring of understanding can be taught by showing the child how to generate their own questions about each paragraph, by underlining 2 interesting words in each paragraph and then explaining why these are interesting. So learning can be verbal and visual. So in addition to a child restating the content of a paragraph in their own words, they could be encouraged to close their eyes after each paragraph and construct a mental picture about what they just read. Often if I'm reading a story myself, that will come naturally. I won't have to stop and really think about it as I'm reading. I've got a visual picture of it in my mind. And it's great to encourage children to do that and get that mental picture of what they've just read. And of course, many of you might use peer learning as well as a really effective strategy. So this can be done in pairs or small groups. And the most effective is cross-age peer learning, where an older child works with a younger child. And these types of sessions can be structured, and they can include both children using the strategies described above and reading to each other. My own children are in years 2 and 4, and I know they love paired reading with children from different year groups, and that's something that they'll come home and tell me about if they've done it that day. So I'm just going to check on time there. Yep, so got time just to mention the next slide as well. So I've just included a screenshot of the audit tool from the DFE reading framework. It's just always something that you can check to see if you are using some of the effective strategies to improve reading that are included in the audit tool. So, for example, there you've got sufficient support accelerates progress, including for new arrivals and pupils who are learning English as an additional language. So thinking about the amount of support, are you providing specific support for children with English as an additional language, and exactly what that might be. It could also be, looking at whether the timetable's managed effectively as well. So pupils are actually have enough time to catch up with their decoding and fluency. And also, if we look at the last point on the table, which says pupils who need more support, leaders support and monitor interventions closely and the impact on pupils' progress is evaluated regularly. So, you know, it's not only about having a really comprehensive suite of intervention strategies to improve reading skills, but it's thinking about how you actually monitor those interventions, how you monitor the impact that they're having, and how you evaluate, you know, whether they're useful or whether you need to change your strategies, use a different combination. And it might be the case that you need to do that anyway, just to meet the needs of different students and different cohorts coming through and their different ability levels. So setting realistic and motivating reading improvement targets. Setting achievable yet ambitious goals is a cornerstone of effective education. And you can translate baseline assessment data into actionable improvement targets. If you first of all identify where your students are now, which areas they need to improve in, and in particular with Cambridge Primary Insight, where you have question level analysis, you can really clearly see what areas the students need to improve, and you can use those to help set realistic and motivating reading improvement targets. So so for example, word recognition, word decoding and comprehension will all be reported separately, and you'll be able to see exactly which questions the students got correct, which ones they got wrong, where they need to improve. And you can then set SMART goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant or realistic, whichever one you like to use, and time-bound, to really inspire students to take ownership of their learning journey and foster that sense of accomplishment as they progress as well. So I mentioned, you know, actually looking at, you know, the real world success stories and best practices and looking at times where baseline assessment has been used to identify students' needs, to decide what interventions are going to be put in place and to help improve reading skills. So at this point, I'd like to introduce you to Lily. Now, our case study on Lily can be found in our case study section of our website at chem.org, alongside some other examples of how our baseline assessments have been used to optimise student potential. But Lily's 7 years old. She's in year 2 of a large primary school in the north of England. She's open and sociable, and she likes to help other children with their work. Her favourite subject is maths, and she especially likes measuring things and drawing graphs. Her mother is a teacher, and Lily too said that she wants to be a teacher when she grows up. So Lily's school uses Chem's INCAS assessment, and Chem has now evolved into Cambridge Primary Insight, which you've heard me mention already. And they use it every year to provide a unique profile for each pupil and to measure the progress that they make, because Cambridge Primary Insight and INCAS in the past have been used to assess students in years 1 through to year 6. So you can carry out that assessment every year to get a really clear idea of where the student is at the start of the year. So INCAS and Cambridge Primary Insight are computer adaptive baseline assessments, and they're tailored to each individual pupil according to their age and abilities, and they'll generate an age equivalent score, so the age that the child is actually working at. And Cambridge Primary Insight and INCAS measure reading, but they also measure maths, spelling, mental arithmetic and developed ability as well. But they also provide a breakdown of scores from each section within those modules, and that enables teachers to establish each pupil's strengths and areas for development. So Lily was assessed using INCAS in November, and although her results were generally as expected, her teacher did notice an unusual pattern in her reading assessment results. So the INCAS reading module evaluates skills in word recognition, word decoding, and comprehension. And the scores of each section of the reading module are displayed on one chart, and that allows a direct comparison of scores. So the feedback from these assessments provides a holistic profile of Lily's strengths and her learning needs. And Lily's teacher can use the feedback to adapt her teaching and learning activities and ensure Lily's skills develop over time. In-class feedback for the whole class is also available in table and chart formats, and that enables really easy comparisons between pupils, between classes, and also whole cohorts to be made. So by examining the age difference column, Lily's teacher notices that although her overall reading scores are generally around her chronological age, her word decoding score is very low, and it's nearly a year and a half below her chronological age. So it's recognised that a child's reading comprehension is underpinned by two key skills, decoding and listening comprehension. And decoding begins with the children learning some letters of the alphabet and recognising a few simple words. So this is where the teaching phonics really comes in. So teaching children phonics also provides the means to understand the words that they don't know immediately. So children become able to read new words using both recognition and decoding strategies. So the word decoding section of the INCAS and Cambridge Primary Insight Assessment presents pupils with a spoken word they normally haven't heard before, nonsense or pseudo words, and asks them to pick the most likely spelling of the word they heard from the 5 choices displayed on the screen. These images are from INCAS, and Cambridge Primary Insight users will see a refreshed version of this with a more sort of bit of a sleeker, more modern look, but ultimately the type of question and what it assesses will be the same. So Lily's low word decoding score indicates that she's unable to distinguish the correct spelling from the alternatives offered. And this is a consistent issue for her. So in terms of the questions that she was answering, she was consistently getting those wrong. And it's common to see this pattern. Children with scores like these are likely to be associating the spoken word with the written word without considering the sounds the individual letters in the word make. So using this technique, they're able to build a large sight vocabulary of common words, enabling them to read with a high degree of fluency, but it doesn't provide them with a strategy for reading unfamiliar words. And Lily's word recognition score, which is a little over her chronological age, provides further proof that she has no issues recognising words which she's already familiar with. So now that Lily's teacher has identified that particular strand affecting her reading, then she can support her and develop her word decoding skills with a range of activities. There doesn't have to be just one sole strategy. For children who have difficulties decoding text, as you mentioned before, phonics-based programs and training in phonological awareness have been found to be particularly effective and are really important. And Lily's teacher finds that when asked to sound out words, she becomes frustrated and she often guesses at words based on the first letter or two. And now that Lily's teacher has identified that particular strand affecting her reading, she can support her and develop her word decoding skills with a range of different activities. So just some examples of what she might use: the look, read, cover, say, check method. Simple word games like matching, snap, or word bingo, really simple fun activities that should be appreciated for their benefits, and teaching phonics in a systematic and explicit way. And also, making it fun, using manipulatives to help teach letter sound relationships. So, for example, counters, sound boxes, magnetic letters, things like that. So that actually brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you for joining us on this insightful journey into the world of developing students' reading skills and using baseline assessments specifically. Remember that every student's reading potential is unique and full of promise, and by harnessing the power of baseline assessments, and that goes throughout the key stages, we can create a roadmap for success for the students, really guiding them towards that improved reading proficiency and a brighter educational future. So with that, Megan, do we have any further questions?
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, there's one question around using baseline assessments to determine if there are any indicators of dyslexia or perhaps any other sort of reading difficulties.
Yeah, so we do say that our baseline assessments are not a diagnostic tool for learning difficulties like dyslexia. However, what most of our schools find is that it can be an early indicator, and it might be one of the first steps once they do their baseline assessment that indicates that students do have a particular difficulty in a particular area, and that might be the starting point for doing further investigation and chasing or referring for a diagnosis.
Excellent, thanks, Suzanne. It doesn't look like there are any other questions. I did put a link to the Lily case study that Suzanne walked through in the chat. So if you want to have a read of that further, please do. Otherwise, I think that just leaves me to say a big thank you to Suzanne for presenting today and to all of you for attending. Hope you found it interesting. We'll be sending the slides and recording around within the next week. But if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. So you've got Suzanne's email address on the screen now, or you can contact us at CEM, that's C-E-M, @cambridge.org. Thank you and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.